proceed with the event. So first of all, thank you so much everyone for joining in. I know everybody's busy with exams and classes, but this is how we commit to making ourselves better. So let's have a very, very productive session today. Just a few small housekeeping rules. You can keep your mic off, but if you have any questions, you may put it in the chat box or you may raise your hand. We will have a Q&A session at the end where we will entertain everybody's questions. So don't worry about that. If at any point if you're having any kind of difficulty, just please let us know in the chat box and we will address it. And yes, you can keep your videos off, but obviously the event is a lot more better if everybody's videos are on, but if not, I completely understand. So also at the end of the event or in the middle of the event, we will be posting a feedback form. So please fill that out so that we can email your participation to you. Again, please keep your cameras off. I mean, your mics mute. And also, there's one thing. Obviously, this is not a class, so I'm not going to pinpoint out to people and ask questions. This is going to be very informal and completely voluntary. So if you feel like answering, please do. But I do believe in incentives. So we are going to keep track of who is participating and who is answering. So that person will win 3 months of free Osmosis Prime, which is a pretty big deal. So keep your ears open for some questions and do participate. So let's move forward. So our topic today is effective communication skills and the art of presentation. Next. So this is a very basic flow of how the event is going to be. First, we will have a very general introduction session. Then we will cover the very basics of spoken English. Then we will cover the art of oration and presentation. This part is mainly going to contain a lot of tips on how we have to, tips we can use as medical students and also as future physicians. And then we will have a Q&A session, which will be like an open forum. You can come and share your stories. You can ask your questions. Okay, so let's move forward. Next slide. Okay, so first, a little bit about me. My name is Moushami Roy. I am an OMF. So I am an Osmosis Medical Education Fellow, and I'm a 4th-year medical clerk. And I will be conducting this session. Next. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you're all medical students, so you're aware of what the Osmosis platform is. It is a medical education platform. So we have educators from all over the world who effectively try to teach the medical students so that they can learn very efficiently. So our mission is to empower clinicians and caregivers with the best learning experience possible. And our vision is that everyone who cares for someone will learn by osmosis. Our values are reach further, spread joy, start with the heart, imagine more, open your arms, and have each other's backs. And we are going to incorporate all of these values in today's session. Next. Okay, so why not start with a meme? I'm pretty sure we've all seen this. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced this because I do it all the time. Let's face it, let's start with a very simple concept in the head. Okay, not all of us come from English speaking backgrounds. Okay, a lot of us are non-native speakers. You will hear us use the words native and non-native speakers a lot. So native speakers who are the ones who have grown up learning English. And then there are non-native speakers like us who have learned English later on in their childhood or in their adulthood. So there are a lot of errors that we make. But before we proceed, there's just this one thing I want everybody to keep in mind, that please don't associate your self-esteem with your ability to speak English. Sometimes it really holds us back. And this is the whole reason behind hosting this session, because you might be a brilliant student, but sometimes you cannot convey your thoughts to your peers or speak up in class or in presentations or to your preceptors or during clinical rotations because you feel like your language is holding you back. So today we're going to try and address that. Also, it is a known fact that our whole course is going to be in English. In fact, you will have to communicate a lot during your clinical rotations, your ASM labs, and everything. In fact, later on in the future, if any of you are planning on going to any other English-speaking country like Australia or England or USA, you will have to give an English language proficiency exam. So if this is something you're really struggling with, so we're going to address that as well. Okay, so let's proceed. So our rationale behind this webinar is to learn the very basics of grammar. Now, grammar is a very big course. This is something we're taught from LKG to I think till the 12th grade. They're teaching us this and that. So we cannot cover every single thing in one webinar, but we will address the very basics that actually that we make mistakes in during our conversations. So we will cover just the very basics. But if you have any doubt or you've noticed that you keep making mistakes in one particular parts of speech, then we can address that as well. Then we will learn how to improve our oration, which includes which includes our pronunciation, our enunciation. We will learn all of that. Then to improve our presentation skills, which is very, very vital for a medical student or a doctor, because later on you're presenting your research findings, everything at CME conferences. So it is important for that. And all in all of this is going to help us build confidence. Now moving on. So now we will have the first session, which is the basics of spoken English. Next slide. I can think of nobody better than our very own Akanksha Pathak conducting this session. She is a 4th year clerk at DMSF with some of the best language skills I've seen a person have. So I'm going to hand over the platform to Akanksha, and let's all give her a welcome.
Thank you so much, Moushami, for this very warm introduction and also for providing me this opportunity to talk about communication over here. As we all know, we are medical students, and the importance of communication is really crucial in this field. So let us start by talking about the art of conversation. So the art of conversation is the art of hearing as well as of being heard. The most important thing in communication is to hear what is not being said. Good communication acts as a bridge between confusion and reality. No matter where we are or what language we speak, sometimes we have trouble communicating, conveying our ideas to the listeners. So these issues don't always happen because of your English language level. The truth is that you can know how to speak English without knowing how to effectively communicate in English. So let us know what is the difference between communication and merely speaking the English language. So, after reading a lot and after experiencing these in the clinics, as well as after talking and conversing with a lot of people, I have found that there are three basic problems in communication, and these happen if the speaker does not express themselves clearly enough, they are not clear, or the speaker uses a language that the listener does not understand fully. Or it can also happen if the listener does not understand the speaker, or the listener is not paying enough attention. So you really have to grab the attention of your listeners if you want to effectively communicate with them. So there are just three basic rules of communication if you follow, so that you can effectively convey your ideas to your audience. So the first basic rule is you have to say what you mean. Be clear from the very beginning. So you have to be really clear to prove your point. Second rule is ask questions. Communication is a two-way thing. Communication cannot happen if your listener is not interested or you are not expressing interest. So, for this and to engage your listeners, to engage the audience, you always have to ask questions, clarify yourself. And the third thing is the most crucial thing in communication, believe it or not, it's listening. So you have to hear your partner out, you have to hear your audience as well to master your communication skills. So moving on, Okay, so here are a few basic tips for clear communication. I have really simplified them first. So, to achieve or to master your communication skills, first thing is you have to find a good speaking rhythm. So, by good speaking rhythm, is I mean, you don't have to speak very fast or very slow. You have to pace your language and put stress on certain words to convey your ideas effectively. So many people have some problem that their speech sounds really monotonous, or sometimes they just read their slides like, if I read this slide as find a good speaking rhythm, make sure you are understood, I don't have any kind of voice modulation, right? So I really have to make it interesting so that my listeners really listen to me. So the solution for this thing is, it will give you time to think your words through if you find a good rhythm. So, for achieving a good rhythm to your speech, the best thing you can do is you can find a very short paragraph or a one liner joke. It can be a silly joke as well, and say the sentence slowly. So, for example, there is a sentence, Mary had a little lamb. So, I can start by saying it out really slowly. Mary had a little lamb. And then I can pace it through to a point where I achieve a speed which I'm really comfortable with. This is how I will gain pace. So you really have to find your own pace where you feel comfortable, so, and your listeners also feel comfortable. And once you achieve that pace, you can also achieve rhythm by stressing on words and intonation, pronunciation, and other stuff which Moshmi is going to talk about further down in the webinar. So the second tip is, make sure that you are understood. So how you can try it out is, ask your audience some questions or practice with your partner. So for example, you can just try it out with your partners or with your roommates, that if you say something, if you convey an idea, so you can just ask them, I want, for example, you can just tell them, I want to make sure you got that right. Would you mind repeating it? Or if you talk to your patients, you can just say, can you please run by me so that I know you got it right? Ask questions to make sure that you are understood, because sometimes the listeners or sometimes the patients won't understand you. So you really have to ask questions. The third tip is, repeat what you have told. So sometimes you really have to clarify the instructions that are received. If a teacher instructs you, or if somebody instructs you, and if you don't understand, really repeat what you are told. So you can just address this issue by just saying it out loud, that I want to make sure I got that right, so I will be repeating your instructions. So this way you will really communicate properly, so you can effectively convey your idea of what you understood, or what the listener told to you. And the fourth thing is, ask clarifying questions. So this I really don't have to elaborate, because you have to ask doubts, no matter if it's a class or if it's a normal conversation. Ask doubts, because sometimes you don't speak up, or if you're not confident, you won't be able to speak up. But trust me, asking doubts really help clarify a lot of issues. The fifth thing is, watch your body language. The biggest problem is, if you're saying, if you ask somebody like, I really want to have lunch with you, I would love to go on a lunch with you, but your body language says something else, so the listener will really think, oh, is this person really interested to go out for a lunch with me? So you really have to have an open stance, use hand gestures like I am doing now, so that the listeners or the person you're talking to really finds that, oh, this person is really interested in talking to me. Because body language is one of the really important skills you'll learn in second year medicine in ASM, and it is a very important thing while talking to patients as well. And the last thing is, use appropriate language. So for appropriate language, I really want to stress the difference between formal language and informal language. For example, I have really observed people using the phrase gonna and wanna in normal speech. It is really okay if you're talking casually to a friend. However, if you're presenting, you cannot use the words gonna and wanna. So you really have to use I am going to, or I want to. You cannot use gonna or wanna. Otherwise, the person who's listening to you in a formal situation will really think that this person doesn't know how to use appropriate language. So these are a few basic tips for clear communication. So moving on, So yeah, I won't be spending much time over here for the parts of speech, because these are really grammar lessons, and this is the basic thing if you want to effectively communicate. So if you want to form sentences, parts of speech really form the core of your sentence. So there are eight important parts of speech. So we can start with noun. So the guideline to use a noun is, noun can be anything, like a name of a person, name of a place, or a thing, or an idea. The basic rule you really have to keep in mind in written English is that proper nouns always start with a capital letter and common nouns do not. So a few words or few examples of nouns are woman, your batch president Shitich, Davao City, and park. So if I want to use a noun in a sentence, I can tell that I can say this as Shitich comes to the library every day. So if you want to highlight, I have really highlighted the nouns in this example. So Shitij is a noun and library is a noun. So Shitij is a proper noun because Shitij is his name, and library is just a normal place. So this is a noun as well. So the second most important thing is pronoun, the second most important part of speech. Why? Is because pronouns is one of the really controversial thing, or a very controversial element in the modern times, because of the LGBTQ community. They are really keen on their pronouns. They really want they really want the world to address based on their pronouns. So we will come to that. So the basic guideline for pronoun is, it is used to refer or it is used to replace the name of a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. Basically, pronoun is a substitute for noun. So how can I simplify this? I can give you an example. So Anisha is one of your batchmates. Anisha is a hardworking girl, and if I say that Anisha is a hardworking girl, Anisha often does her work on time. So I'm using Anisha's name a lot in this, right? So I can just simply say that Anisha is a hardworking girl. She does not. She does her work on time. So this is how I'm shortening my speech so that the person is still interested in what I'm saying. So other example is, Carlos likes cooking. They want to become a chef. So keep that in mind that I have used the pronoun they because I'm coming to the really controversial or really sensitive topic right now. So if you think about pronouns, you might also have seen in Instagram bios that nowadays people are putting in their bios he, him, she, her. So these are the pronouns they really want the world to address them as. So let's have a small activity. It's voluntary. You guys can really open your mic and participate. As Moshmi has mentioned that we'll be keeping a track of who's answering the most so that you guys will get a 3-month free Osmosis Prime incentive. So I'll give you a scenario. So the scenario is about a person named Kylie. However, Kylie identifies as a transgender person. She is a transgender woman. However, she also likes the world to call or address her as they or them. So I will give you guys two sentences. I really want you guys to use pronouns in this one. So the two sentences are, Kylie likes gardening. Kylie wants to become a professional gardener. So how can you guys use the pronouns they or them here? Can you guys, if it's voluntary, you guys can open your mic and tell me. Anybody would like to? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead. Whoever raised, I see two participants have raised their hands. You can unmute and go ahead. Is there anyone who has raised their hand? Anushka has raised her hand. Can you go ahead? If you want me to repeat the sentence, you can still ask me. And I also see Jayashri has raised her hand. You guys can unmute. I think nobody wants to. Nobody wants the 3 months Osmosis Prime. Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and I'll address this. So you guys know that Kylie is the one. Oh, okay. Somebody is unable to unmute. Okay. The host has to unmute you guys. You can read.
Hello.
Hello, yeah, Jayashree, go ahead.
Can you, do you mind repeating the sentence?
Yeah, so the sentence is Kylie likes gardening. Kylie wants to become a professional gardener. How would you use the
Kylie,
pronouns?
Likes gardening. They
Yeah.
want to become a professional gardener.
Yeah, that's really good. Good. That's really good. So, thank you so much, Jayashree, for unmuting and answering this question. So, this is really important in modern days in 2022 because you guys know, right, about the LGBTQ community and how sensitive this topic is. So, in the future, if a person belonging to the LGBTQ community comes to your clinic, so it is really important to ask them their pronouns. How would they you just ask them, how would you like me to refer you as, what are your pronouns? Because there have been instances where they haven't been they aren't comfortable, or they have reported that they have been the doctors have misbehaved with them because they did not use the pronouns right. So there have been many instances, there have been many situations. So please ask your patients, or please, if you communicate with anybody, it is best to ask them how can you refer them as, or if should you refer to them as she, her, them, they. So it's really important. So thank you so much, Jayashree, for answering. So moving on to the verb. So the verb expresses an action or a being, and a verb must agree with its subject. So it, for example, if you use the words
छूटिया
play,
बच्चे
somebody unmuted. Okay, never mind. So, so the verb expresses an action or a being, and as I mentioned, a verb should always agree with its subject. So, this subject-verb agreement will be tackled by Moushami later, further down in the webinar. So, I just want to clarify a few things about the subject part. So, for example, I'll give you a certain example in this table, that is Jack is eating apples. So, in this sentence, Jack is the subject because he is doing the action. So the action that he is doing is to eat. So Jack is the subject, eating is the action word or the verb, and apples is the object. So if subject does something to the object, so the subject and the verb, that is Jack and eating, should always coincide with each other. They should agree with each other in number, that is singularity and plural. So it should always agree, and it will be tackled by Moshmi further down in the webinar. So I really want to clarify this one thing about subject, that subject is the thing, or subject is the element in a sentence that does the job. Okay, so moving on to adverb. So adverb is used to describe a verb. It expands a verb or an adjective, or it might also expand or add on to another adverb. So a few examples of adverb are gently, carefully, always, or silently. So I've given a few examples over here. So the example is the car rolled down the hill quickly. So here I've highlighted quickly because quickly is the adverb. It is expanding on how the car rolled down. It is expanding on the action done by the car. So next example is she brought me a very long letter. So long over here and very. So very is expanding on how the letter is. So very is an adverb. Moving on to adjective. So adjective is basically a describing word. It will just tell how a noun is or how a pronoun is. For a few examples of adjectives are long, short, tiny, and bright. So I have given an example over here, and that is Moshmi is very tall. She is a bright student. So tall over here is your adjective because tall is describing Moshmi. And bright is also an example because bright describes Moushami. So here are two adjectives that are describing Moushami. So next up is preposition. It is always placed before a noun or a pronoun. So a few examples are in, on, at, with, etc. So example is he presided over the meeting. So over here is your preposition. So just observe that it is always placed before the noun. So a meeting is the noun over here. So it is always placed before the noun. The next up is interjection. Interjection are just your exclamations. It expresses your emotions. So a few examples are like wow, oh, something like that. And examples of how you can use an interjection in your sentence is oh, I'm sorry, or wow, look at the view. And last up is conjunction, and it is also one of the most important part in written English as well as your spoken English. Why? Because it helps you shorten your sentences. You don't want to speak long sentences and really bore your listeners, right? So conjunction is the key to really shorten your speech and keep your speech to the point so that you can really convey your idea correctly. So, a few examples of your conjunctions are and, but, because, where, etc. So, here's a tip from me that always in written English and, if possible, in spoken English, avoid using the conjunctions in the beginning of the sentence. So, if I start my sentence with because or and, it's not advisable. So, these are just a few rules, basic rules of English grammar. So, here is an example. So if I say that I tend to stay up at late at night, I end up getting less sleep. So I'm saying long sentences, right? So instead of saying these two long sentences, I'll just shorten my speech as I tend to stay up late at night and end up getting less sleep. So here I'm really shortening my sentences. One more example is if there are two long sentences like she went to the beach, she wanted to sleep. So just just something like you can just use that as she went to the beach because she wanted to sleep. Yeah, this is a very weird example, but it is what it is, right? So thank you so much for this thing, and I would like to hand over the platform to Moshmi for further instructions. Moving on.
Thank you so much, Akanksha. That was such a wonderful refresher course on the parts of speech. In fact, like that is the very basic, that is your skeleton of the English language. If you don't know the parts of speech, then you'll have a really, really difficult time, making sentences. So thank you so much. And now we're going to move forward with subject verb agreement. So Akansha mentioned about the subject and the object of the sentence and the verb. So a small example before we proceed. I am watching Netflix. In the sentence, I am the subject. Watching is the verb or the action. And over here, Netflix will be the object, which means that it is the one receiving the action. Okay, so to understand subject verb agreement, so make sure that you're very clear about this. Now, if I'm going fast, or please let me know, please unmute and let me know if I'm going too fast. Okay, so let's continue. So a simple basic guideline is that a singular subject takes a singular verb and a plural subject takes a plural verb. This is the most commonly made mistake in the English language. Let's give an example. A researcher wants to get his or her paper published in a journal. Researchers want to get their papers published in a journal. Now, I find the English language very, very intriguing just because of this tip. Generally, you add an S to a subject to make it plural, girls, boys, right? And you delete an S from a verb to make it plural. So a researcher, which is the subject, okay, writes, speaks, and follows, okay? And then researchers, as soon as my subject is plural, you will see that the verb will become plural also, but over here, the S has been removed. So researchers write, speak, and follow. Next slide. This is one of my favorite topics to tackle because this is something you will notice mainly in Indian English speakers. In fact, this is something even I include a lot in my speeches. Okay, this is called redundancy. Redundant phrases include two or more of the same words, okay, that repeat the same idea. And we use this unknowingly. I think most of us don't even know what we're saying is wrong. For example, plan ahead. Okay, it's a plan, which is why it is ahead. These are words that should not be used together. End result. Result comes at the end. So there is no point of saying end result. 8 p.m. in the night. If I've already said 8 p.m., then it is pretty clear that it is in the night. Okay. Blue in color. Yeah, this is very common. Blue in color, rectangular in shape, red in color. This is again redundant and it makes the sentence very flowery. Okay, or too long. So these are some common non-native mistakes that we should avoid. New innovation. Okay, innovations are new. So new innovation is basically a very redundant phrase. Prerequisite requirement. Both of these words mean the same. For example, filling the HDF is a prerequisite for entering DMSF, or filling the HDF is a requirement for entering DMSF. There is nothing like prerequisite requirement. It is the same as saying the two words that mean the exact same. Again, exact replica. It is exact, that is why it is a replica. So we must try and avoid these redundant phrases or words in our everyday languages. Next. Vocabulary. Now over here, I'm going to give some examples of some very common errors. Okay, first is incorrect use of less. These are things that even preceptors have pointed out during our presentation. So I've just made a collection of this and I am telling all of you this so then preceptors don't point it out later on in the future. So first is the incorrect use of less. Example, the speed of this car is very less. We get what you're trying to say, but this is not, less is not used in the right context over here. So this is wrong. The car is very slow is a much more better constructed sentence. The cost of this bread is less. Again, that's wrong. This bread cost less. This bread is cheap. Passed out. Oh my God. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard this phrase being used so many times. You know, study hard for the exam and you will get pass. That is wrong. I am sorry, but get pass is not a word. Okay, passed out does not mean to graduate. Passed out means to faint. Okay, I passed out from the heat. She passed out because of exhaustion. Okay, it does not mean to graduate. Then years before. It happened in the past, then it happened years ago, not years before. In a sentence like it happened 5 years before becomes a comparative noun. Therefore, you will either need to specify 5 years before what or use the word ago. For example, I joined DMSF 3 years ago. I joined DMSF 1 year before the pandemic. Okay. Then next we will go on to revert. Now, revert, it means to return to a former state. But non-native speakers, we incorrectly use it to mean reply or to respond. You know, like, please read this email and revert to me is wrong. Yes. Please read this email and reply is a more correct phrase. Next sentence and next slide. Do the needful. This is an archaic phrase. When I say archaic, I mean that this is no longer welcome, no longer used. Always replace it with do what's necessary or do what's required, depending on what the tone warrants. Do one thing. This is again very common in us Indians. Do one thing is a very Indian phrase that does not make sense. It is generally used at the beginning of a reply. For example, your friend asks you, how do I fix this? Then you say, do one thing, clear everything out, make sure you get new equipment, and then call an expert. You've just told him do one thing and then given him a list of things to do. So you can see how this does not make sense. So instead, you can phrase the sentence like, you can clear everything out, make sure you get new equipment, and then you can call an expert. Okay, there is no necessity for the phrase do one thing over here. Next. Okay, so over here I have I have written down a list of words, okay, that are very commonly used. Okay, these are the non-native ones and the native ones, that are the ones that are supposed to be used right now. Now I will be sharing this presentation with your president Kshitij, so you can get a copy. Okay, so first, prepone. Prepone is not really a prepone is, I mean, even though the word is correct, it is a non-native word. And the native word would be brought forward. The meeting has been brought forward. Tight slap, again, we have, while fighting also, we've said, oh, I'll give you one tight slap. Tight slap is again a non-native phrase. It is a hard slap. There is nobody who said that you cannot have a grammatically correct conversation while fighting. So next time you're fighting somebody, you say, I'll give you one hard slap, not tight slap. Cousin brother, cousin sister, again, that's not used anymore, it's cousin. Time pass is past time. Out of station is out of town. Today morning or yesterday night, instead of this, you say this morning. Okay, I ate breakfast this morning, I went out last night. Reply back is not used, it's reply. Can someone please tell me what reply back is an example of? We have just spoken about this. Sorry, come again.
Redundancy.
Yes, perfect, very good. I love that you all are paying attention. By the time we're done with this, we're all going to be Shashi Tharoors, I'm pretty sure. Okay, let's move on. So eve teasing. Eve teasing is again a very non-native phrase. Instead, it's called sexual harassment. My head is paining. We use this a lot. Oh my God, it's too hot. My head is paining. I've been studying all day. My head is paining. It's my head hurts. I have a headache. Keep the phone, hang up. Mention not, again, we use this, mention not in response to thank you, but instead you're supposed to say, you're welcome. Neck to neck is neck and neck. Like the results were neck and neck. Okay, next slide. Okay, now unidiomatic expressions. Okay, now unidiomatic expressions, what I have seen is that people usually use when they are being thankful or being grateful or basically being polite. Now, being polite is a virtue, but nobody needs to sound that contrite. It sounds very flowery. Okay, like this is mainly seen in Indian and Japanese English because we value politeness. We want the other person to think that we are being very, very polite, but the language becomes very flowery to the point where it is wrong. So, for example, I would like to humbly thank you for your kind words is a very long sentence. As good as it sounds, thank you for your kind words does just the justice. Okay. I would like to beg your esteemed favor. Feels as though we're talking to a king. No, it's not. It's not like that. Could you do me a favor? Will you do me a favor? That's perfect. I am directed to inform you. I have been asked to inform you. Now, the reason I'm pointing all of this out is because these are things that have been pointed out to us by doctors or by preceptors. And then, I mean, so many times, I swear I'm not trying to scare you and all, but so many preceptors have like pointed out, you Indians don't really speak English all that well. And if you do, then they'll be surprised. Oh my God, your English is so good. It's just because of mistakes like this. But these are things that we can really, really avoid. Next. Now we're going to move on to the art of oration and presentation. Now that we know the very basics of grammar, we are going to talk about how to speak. Okay, next slide. First is pronunciation. Okay, now you heard how I said this word, pronunciation. It is not pronunciation. We tend to say pronunciation as soon as, because we just glance at the word. When we're just learning to speak English, what we do is we glance at the word and pronun appears to be pronoun. So we are like pronunciation. So in order to speak more clearly, you can break down the word. Pronunciation, psychology. Now, familiarity, you cannot do this for every single word. This will come with a lot of practice, because familiarity will come with practice, because every word is not pronounced in the same manner. Like, for example, in the list of words that you see below, they all have O-U-G-H, okay? Let's take the first word, enough. Over here, O-U-G-H, it's sounded out as uff, but the second word is not called duff. It is do. Over here, every single word is pronounced in a different manner. Enough, do, through, plow. So improving your pronunciation will help you with reading, writing, and communication, because a better understanding of English pronunciation will lead to what? Less confusion, especially during conversations. Especially because the medical jargon is so difficult. There are so many words that that they're so difficult, like they should come out at a spelling bee. So it is very important for us to practice. Now there are some ways you can practice. Like the way I used to practice is in front of a mirror, taking a newspaper, a book, and reading it loud in front of the mirror. But I'll go on to the tips much later, don't worry about it. So since our whole course is in like English, so please do focus on your pronunciation. In fact, if your weak areas are just pronunciations, then you can go to the British Council website. They have a whole course on vowels, consonants, and diphthongs, which will really help you, speak English in a more eloquent way. Next slide. Now, enunciation. It's very common. People think pronunciation and enunciation are one and the same thing. Enunciation is the act of saying a word clearly and concisely, whereas pronunciation is the act of saying a word correctly. So, in order to enunciate properly, you have to speak clearly and avoid mumbling. This is something that we're always accused of. Doctors or even our peers will like, speak clearly. What are you saying? So it is important for you to enunciate. So to do that, you have to practice with intention. What is that? That is, set your eyes on whatever is there in front of you. Okay, it could be a bottle, it could be a chair, and practice saying it. Doesn't matter how small it is or whatever it is. Try to sound out your words crisply and clearly over it. So you can practice this anywhere, and you will find that just by sending your intention a little further, you will crisp up these sounds in no time. This is called practice with intention. Now train the muscles of your face and tongue. The best way to do it, obviously there are no weights for your face muscles and all. The best way to do it is tongue twisters. Okay, take out a list of tongue twisters and read them. Okay, for example, whether the weather is warm, whether the weather is hot, we'll weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. So this is almost like cardio for your mouth and your face muscles. So does anybody want to give it a try? The second one, anyone? Come on, no judgment here.
Round
Okay.
and round, the ragged rascal ran.
Very good. Very, very good. I'm so happy everybody's coming forward. Okay, the third one.
Betty bought bit of butter, but a bit of butter Betty bought was bitter.
Now, very good. That was perfect. So you can see that this is almost like a workout. So if you're going to practice tongue twisters in front of a mirror, you will see that words will flow out so clearly, okay, that people will literally be surprised and shocked. Okay, so this is a very, very good thing to do. Okay, the last one. Who's going to go for the last one? Come on, this is a tough one.
Theo
You want-
sifter, the thistle sifter, sifted a sieve of sifted thistles.
Very good. Very, very good. See, you guys are already so good at this. So just with a little bit of more practice and all, you will have enunciation. You will have perfected your enunciation. The next is practice reading in front of a mirror. Okay, to improve your vocal charisma. Vocal charisma is a thing. You know that it is actually a thing, because you wouldn't listen to a TEDx speaker if they have good content but they're not able to speak well. They cannot hold the attention of the audience at all. You need to have vocal charisma. In fact, later on when you have your ASM in second year, you will have your ASM labs, and sometimes instead of performing, your preceptors are going to ask you to just verbalize. Sometimes it happens that we have forgotten a part, we have forgotten, let's say, to introduce ourselves. But if you have the confidence, the pronunciation, enunciation, sometimes they will let that go because they'll be like, okay, she's a very, very good speaker. But that does not mean that you will mess up your ASM list. Please don't do that. Please don't tell them I told you to do that or anything. I'm just saying that this is just one advantage of speaking clearly, because sometimes they're just so enticed by how well you're speaking. Then also one more thing you can do is, this is a little controversial. So many of my friends are against it. So many of my friends are for it. Try watching something with your captions on. Believe it or not, it really, really helps you improve your English. Not auto-generated captions, actual proper Netflix captions. They really, really help you understand vocabulary and improve your language. Okay, next slide. Now, tips to keep in mind while presenting. Now, throughout your medical course, you're going to do so many presentations. Okay, so many, second year, third year, presenting a case, okay, presenting even your OSCE exams. So these are some tips that you can use. Also, like later on, you might be able to host synapse or intramurals and everything. If you really want to do something like that, these are some things that will really help you out. So these are some tips that you can keep in mind while presenting. First, know your audience. The kind of language you choose while presenting really, really depends on your audience. Let's say that I am going to give a speech to all the doctors. Okay, all the doctors present at TMSF and I'm going to present a case. I can use all the medical jargon I know, okay? I can say oligomenorrhea. Okay, I can say words like that. I can say hydrocephalus, okay? They will understand. So, but imagine you're giving the same, you're given, let's say, a topic like menstrual hygiene to talk to some people at a camp, okay, who do not have any idea of what these words are. In that time, you have to use layman language, like, okay, not oligomenorrhea, but like, decreased menses, okay, menstruation, periods, words like that. Okay, so it is very important to know your audience. Second, expect to be nervous. Anybody who tells you, or anybody who's told me before that it's okay, you don't have to be nervous, okay, you will not be nervous once you go on stage, everything is fine. No, expect to be nervous. It is completely all right, it is completely normal to be nervous, because if you're expecting it, you can tackle it. Because I go up on stage with all this false confidence, and then I'm like, oh my god, all these faces, oh my god, the spotlight is on me, I don't know what to do. So expect to be nervous, because if you know it, then you can really, really tackle with it. Now, practice in a realistic environment. You know the meme that we started with? Sometimes we will write down a speech and then we will just read it in our head. Yeah, I have it all right. I know it. I know how to pronounce this word. But take the same speech, call all of your friends, make them sit down, and then be like, okay, I'm going to read out my speech in front of you. You will see that this becomes a more realistic environment. You will, at that point, you will realize, okay, making eye contact with my friends is really, really difficult. I cannot do that. So that is something I should work on. This is a word that I can somehow pronounce in my head, but I'm unable to do so in an actual. So I'm going to Google the pronunciation of this word. Okay, soliloquy. How do I say this, right? So practice in a realistic environment. Now breathe deeply to expand your vocal range. This not only helps with expansion of vocal range, but also to calm your nerves. And this is the most important of all, identify and eliminate verbal tics. What do I mean about verbal tics? I'm not talking about Tourette syndrome. Verbal tics as in like, but, so many times you're speaking out and then you're like, don't associate this with like, I was doing this, but like, but, these are called verbal tics. This is something which makes the audience disconnect from you. Then you're like, okay, I've already lost their attention. So if you're speaking out loud, your friends, in fact, people you speak to, they will be like, okay, in the sentence that you've spoken, you have said 4 times. So now you have identified it, and now you can work on eliminating this verbal tic. Okay, let's move on. Next slide. Okay, now tips for an effective presentation. Do not memorize your lines. Oh my God, I've told this so many people, do not memorize your lines. What you can actually do is write down bullet points. Again, two things. Don't memorize your lines. Don't write your whole speech on a piece of paper. Because if you get lost, your eyes are basically scanning the whole paper that, oh, where was I? Where was I? And then you have paused. And then your audience is wondering, what is she doing? Okay, so don't memorize it, write down bullet points. Okay, first I'm going to talk about basics of grammar. Second, I'm going to talk about enunciation. Okay, so in this way, you know what to talk about next, and you're also not completely dependent on your notes. Second, get the audience invested. You can do this with personal anecdote by asking a question. So if the audience is invested, or starting with a quote. Okay, so once the audience is invested, okay, there's more chance that they will listen to your whole speech or your whole presentation. Because believe it or not, even later on when you're doing case presentations and you have like 20 marks on this, and the preceptor is like on their phone or they're not paying attention, the panel you're presenting your research to. But if you start off with a quote or with voice modulation or something like that, or with a personal story, like before I start, there's just this one thing I wanted to say, or I cannot imagine what this must have happened, or like, oh my God, let me tell you guys about an incident that happened with me while I was collecting data for my research. They're intrigued, and once you've got their attention, then you slowly move on to your presentation. Believe it or not, you're getting 20 on 20 for that, just for the way you have presented. Visit the space beforehand. This is just a personal thing. I feel like if I'm going to give a speech in front of a large audience, if possible, if I can practice there or just visit the layout once, then I feel more comfortable. And a smile goes a very, very long way. Okay, but again, please remember when to smile. If you're giving a speech about motivation, let's say you're the valedictorian and you're giving your speech, then yes, smile goes a long way. But if you are presenting a case and then you start smiling, people are going to think you're a psychopath. You're like, okay, patient has abnormal uterine bleeding secondary to submucosal leiomyoma. Your preceptor is going to think that you're crazy. Okay, or you're a psychopath, and then they'll be like, okay, fine, the diagnosis is correct, but the student is a psychopath. No, so remember where to smile and where not to. Okay, next slide. Now, this is very important. How does effective communication help physicians? When you meet a person for the first time, it is not possible that you can build relationship this instantly. Okay, you cannot get your patients to trust you this instantly. Okay, how will they trust you? They don't even know you. They have come to tell you sickness that they've been dealing with for so long. But to do that, for them to tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, they have to trust you. And communication is going to help you create a good interpersonal relationship with the patient. It will help facilitate the exchange of personal information later on in your ASM, or in the in different modules. You're going to learn what are some things. Even today we will cover some factors to extract information out of your patients. Okay, not torture or anything, some genuinely proven methods. Okay, then this will help you include the patient in decision making. Again, in the future when you're going to study treatment, right now, like how we believe in evidence-based medicine, we also believe in patient-centered treatment. That means involving the patient. If you see, most of these doctors, they will just write down, okay, take this medicine, do this, do that, and all. This is how you treat your disease. But if you can give, like, if you can involve your patient and be like, do you think you will be able to do this? Okay, polycystic ovarian syndrome, you really need to tackle your weight. You need to be in a healthy BMI. Do you think you have the opportunity to exercise for 30 minutes every single day? So effective communication will help you include the patient in decision making. Then obviously empowerment of patients. So today patients recognize that they have more power when dealing with a physician in malpractice suits. Okay, communication will really get you out of malpractice suits, keep that in mind. So they are more inclined to speak up and voice a complaint. So they also have more information at their fingertips with the arrival of the internet to diagnose symptoms correctly. So if you can communicate better with them, you can build a good relationship to get them to say what they're feeling. Okay, and also conflict resolution. This is something you will have to do maybe when you're a junior resident, amongst interns, amongst patients. It will avoid creating extra drama or getting dragged into legal matters. Next slide. Now we have come to the last part of our presentation, which is active listening skills. Now, people believe that good communication, this is something Akanksha has stressed on in the beginning, and I'm going to stress on it again. Communication is not just speaking. Okay, you don't just have to speak. Active listening skills are a vital part of having good communications. It is also understanding what the other person is speaking. Now, this is a whole chapter later on when you're going to do community medicine in the third year. So I will just explain the very little gist of what active listening skills are. Next slide. So you have attending skills, bracketing, leading, reflecting, focusing, probing. Let's just explore these one by one in a very concise manner. Next slide. First are your attending skills, which means that skills you should have as a physician. Now remember that these are some skills that you can also use even before you're a physician. You'll have to use this in your clerkship years. These are skills you can use when a friend comes to you with a problem. I believe that if you can start incorporating these skills from now, then communication later on becomes very, very easy. So attending skills include leaning forward, tilting or nodding the head or raising the eyebrows. This shows that you're really invested in the conversation. Maintaining eye contact. If the patient is talking and you're just like on your phone, they're not going to open up. They'll be like, this doctor's not interested. I'm just going to walk out of here. Maintaining eye contact does a very, very good thing during conversation. Then being seated at a 45-degree angle as you speak to the patient. I don't know if you all know this, but right now if you go to the doctors, then we are seated across the table, the doctors on the other side of the table, but it has been said that if you can sit in front of the patient, like right here at a 45-degree angle, then it is a very good attending skill. Now, these are some things that you have to avoid, which is leaning backwards, looking away from the patient, crossing one arm, okay, avoiding certain habits of movement, such as distracting a patient, like twirling pencils, scratching your heads, or tapping your feet. All of these are things that you should not do. Next slide. Bracketing. Bracketing is a very important life skill also. It's a mental skill. It is something you could incorporate, which means that setting aside feelings and thoughts of judgment temporarily so that there will be space in our minds and in our hearts for what the patient is really, really saying. Okay. What does this mean? This not only implies to prejudice, like for example, if you see, let's say a transgender patient, coming to you, and then you already have something in your head against these transgender patients, or you have something against, the LGBTQ community. Every prejudice that you have, please set it aside. Secondly, when the patient starts talking, don't start forming opinions right away. Because if you do that, it will actually make you misdiagnose. Okay, let me give you an example of what I'm saying. In third year pediatrics, when we were doing a case, it was like this. The doctor was pretending to be the mother of the patient, and we were taking her history. So she started saying symptoms like, oh, the patient, the swelling at the top of the head, basically swelling of the fontanelles. The patient has fever, and my baby is vomiting. My baby is like, has nausea and is not eating properly, is very lethargic, is not crying and all. As soon as I heard bulging fontanelle and the rest of the symptoms, in my head, I was like, okay, I know the diagnosis, it's hydrocephalus. It's hydrocephalus. In fact, my mind was not open to anything else because I did not bracket. Okay, had I asked the proper questions, had I set aside everything that I was thinking at that point, I would have asked the right questions. I would have done the correct examination. Because later on, the doctor told us that, yeah, hydrocephalus is a thing. But if I had asked the right questions, I would have gotten to know that she comes from a very crowded locality. Also, she has nuchal rigidity. Okay, Kernig's, positive for Kernig's and Brudzinski sign is something you will hear later. So what this baby actually had was meningitis, but the diagnosis I gave was hydrocephalus because I did not bracket. I had already made up my mind that what this patient has is hydrocephalus. So bracketing is something that is also going to make you a good doctor. Next slide. Leading. Okay, so leading is of two types. You have indirect leading. This is something you mainly do at the beginning when the patient is just coming to your clinic and is sitting down, which is an open invitation made by the doctor counselor for the patient to talk about anything that he wishes. For example, how may I help you today? Or what brings you here today? Okay, why are you here today? So these are all open-ended questions and it could go anywhere. This is indirect leading. Direct leading is when a doctor makes a judgment call as to where the patient should go and ask him to go in that direction. A patient is going to talk about a million things, especially if you're rotating in the psychiatric ward, then there are legit diagnosable conditions such as word salad, flight of ideas, neologism, okay, verbigeration. They will literally start repeating seamlessly meaningless words. Okay, so in this point, you need to do direct leading, as in ask questions that will directly lead you to the answer that you're looking for. Like the patient said, oh, I had a very high fever at the night, and then later on I woke up and then I went to get some medications. You stop the patient right there and be like, okay, you mentioned that you had a fever. Did you document your fever? Did you have some other symptoms? Did you feel nauseous? Did you also have a headache? So these are direct leading. Okay, next. Reflecting skills. So first is, this is reflecting on the patient's feeling, content, and experience. So reflecting feeling is basically like when the patient is, let's say the patient is talking about something deeply personal and appears angry. So reflecting feeling is saying something like, I have noticed that when you're talking about your relationship with your mother, it makes you really, really angry. What is that about? Would you care to expand on that? That is reflecting feeling. Then reflecting content. That means taking the verbal content of what the patient says, repackages and rephrases it so that it becomes clearer. Let's say the patient has given a lot of information and you're unclear about it. So you reflect content that, okay, you said that this. Am I right? Does that mean this? So that is reflecting content. And reflecting experience is descriptive feedback that relates to broad observation of the patient. This is a part of non-verbal communication. You're also like, oh, I am noticing that you're shaking your leg a lot. Okay, are you nervous right now? Are you feeling cold? So it is basically observing. This is a part of non-verbal communication also. Next. Focusing. So sometimes, like I said, patients really talk about a lot of things. Yeah, patients talk about, sorry, I'm having an error. Okay, so patients talk about a lot of things and they go into many details. So focusing helps you choose what is most important to the patient. They can give you a wide array of details, but focusing is picking out on one thing that you want to choose. So it's basically focusing. So enumerating the emotions and ask the patient to choose which one is the most trouble for the patient. The patient comes and says that I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling anxious, I am sad. So you pick out one of the emotions the patient is feeling and ask the patient to expand on that. You said you're feeling anxious. Could you please tell me what do you think might be causing that? That is focusing. Then probing. Probes are questions that are asked in order to elicit more information, and they have an important role to play in the counseling process. And they must be open-ended, which means that they shouldn't be answerable by yes or no. So these questions can begin with what or where or when. Like, for example, you don't ask the patient, are you feeling cold? Okay, because they can only answer that with yes or no. Okay, but in probing, you ask more open-ended questions. Okay, like, okay, what were you doing right before you had the seizure? Or where were you when you, where were you when you fainted? Or when did you have, when did you have these, when did your temperature start to rise? So things like that. That is probing. Okay, so these were pretty much all of the active listening skills. And next slide. Now we are going to open up the forum for any questions that you may have. You can ask Akanksha, you can ask me, any questions that you may have, and we will try to answer them. Again, this is an open forum. There's no judgment. So you can either, if you're afraid to speak up, you can text your question in the chat box. Any questions, guys? Any doubts? You want to share something, some experience that you may have had? You're absolutely welcome to do so. Okay, okay. Kshitij has a question. What would be the best advice for tackling stage fears? Most of us have it. Okay, that's a very, very good question, Kshitij. So stage fear is absolutely very, very common. It can be crippling at times. Some of the things that you can do to tackle stage fear is, first, try in psychology, there's something called exposure therapy. Okay, to tackle any fear, you will have to expose yourself to that fear a little bit. So you want to tackle stage fear, then you know you have stage fright, but you want to speak on stage. Then do this. Try speaking in front of a very small audience. Call your family members, talk in front of them. Call 4 of your friends. Okay, give them a presentation about something. Little by little, you will be able to talk on the stage. And also, when you're on the stage, I feel like what scares me the most is making eye contact with people. Okay, so sometimes I'll be like, okay, what if they're judging me? What if I forget? So what I try to do is, maybe I will look at their foreheads, nobody's going to know, or I will look at a pillar, or I will look at the door. Okay, I will not look at my sheet where I have my pointers written, but that helps. So really try speaking in front of really, really small crowds. Okay, and by doing that, you will see that, one day you're able to speak in front of a huge audience and you have overcome your stage fear. But really, first try the small crowds first. Akanksha, would you like to add something?
No, Moushami, you pretty much covered everything. Even I find it so helpful by looking at people's foreheads to conquer my stage fright, because it is a very common thing that everybody has. So, to address this thing, I think this is the best way to look at people's foreheads and also to think your speech through, think while talking. So, this way you will avoid mumbling as well. So, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Akanksha.
I have a question. So usually what happens when I'm trying to report, or when I'm giving a presentation, or when I'm even talking in the STD time. So what happens is, when I'm speaking, so in between the native language, some few words of my native language, I tend to speak in between. And then I forget that, I'm talking in English, and I start talking in native language. And then they correct me, no, we're not understanding. Can you go back to English? So that's the common thing that I face. What any solution for that? Like, even some few words that, if, I may use words, but I, tend to put a native word in it, native language word in it. So any tips for that?
Thank you so much, Jayashree, for your question. That is a very common problem that we face. And you know what is the reason that happens? It's because there are some words that we know in our native language and not in English language. Okay, so over here, this is where vocabulary comes. Or sometimes what happens, yeah, you do know the word, but you're so used to sometimes even when I'm speaking a sentence, there are some words that I only know the Hindi of, or I only know the Bengali of. And then my friends will be like, what does that mean? So one way to tackle with that is, obviously, if your friends are pointing it out, you can ask your friends, point out to me what are the words that I commonly speak in my native language. Secondly, what helps is improving your vocabulary. There's something you can do is like to improve your range of vocabulary so that you don't keep using words from your native language is take a notebook or on your iPad or your computer, open a document, maybe try learning 2 new words from the dictionary every single day. This is something I used to do as a child a lot. I have actually struggled a lot with the English language. So this is something I used to do as a child, and it has really, really helped me. And also, maybe try for a small portion of your day, try talking to people completely in English, because sometimes when I'm at home and I'm just talking to my friends in Hindi, my parents in Hindi, then when I go to college, I'm seeing that I've lost the flow, right? Especially after a vacation or something, I've lost the flow, and I tend to
that
do that
happens a
more.
lot.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Hello, Moushami, and hello, Akanksha. First of all, I would like to say amazing webinar, and I found this very helpful and even noted down some of the points. My question for you is how do you, I would love to know if you have any advices or any suggestions on one-on-one interactions, how to leave an impression on a person, or how to carry yourself in front of people. Any suggestion?
Thank you for your question. When you mean one-on-one interaction, is it just general or with your peers or with professors?
Informal as well as formal, mostly formal interactions.
Okay. See, that's a very good question. And I would, in fact, encourage formal interactions, because that will lead you to networking. I don't think this is stressed enough that networking is very, very important for medical students. It is not just for the people doing BBA and MBA. Networking is essential. Honestly, if you want to get anywhere, network like your life depends on it. So for that, like you said, leaving an impression is extremely important. You can do that by, let's say, by having, like, if I'm let's start with like a formal formal thing. It's like finding common ground. Okay, that is always a good way to go. Okay, I'll start with informal first. Finding common ground. You want to go approach a patient or something, or you want to go approach a friend. Okay, find a little bit of common ground. If I'm talking to a girl or something, I'll be like, hey, I really like your hair. Oh, where do you get that done? This is some way to break the ice. Okay, finding common ground. This is an informal conversation with somebody that you do not know. When it comes to a formal conversation, okay, it's, you must go and, like, for example, after a lecture, I always tell everybody who I talk to, go talk to your professors. It's really, really helpful. Okay, they will, in fact, that's how you get research opportunities and everything. Go talk to your professor and be like, doc, I really enjoyed this, but I had a problem when you were talking about this and that. And let them know that you are open to learning more from them. We are very afraid when they see that this is a curious child. Okay, it leaves a good impression on them. Like, let them know, okay, doc, I'm really interested in research. If there are any opportunities in the future where you need a student, even if it is data collection, let me know. Okay, then that leaves a good impression. And one more thing is that when you want to appear charismatic or be charismatic, I would say remember little details about people. Okay, that goes a very, very long way. Literally, you go up to a person and be like, oh, how is your dog doing? You, last time we spoke, you said he was sick. This shows that you're a charming person, and it will 100% leave an impression on the person that you're talking to. And to improve this skill, there is a very simple life hack that even I do. When you're in the airport, go and talk to strangers. It's okay, make up complete lies about yourself, but go talk to strangers. It will really, really help you improve your communication skills, and you will somehow get to know that, okay, these are the things that I do that people seem to like about me. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mosh, I think when you were answering the question by Jayashree, there was an interruption in your internet. Can you just explain once more about the question she asked? The first one.
Oh no.
Yeah,
One second. Am I audible now?
yeah, you are audible now, but during the first question, when you were answering the question, it got interrupted in the between. So if you don't mind, can you just repeat what you just said for the first question?
Ritesh, could you please remind me what question that was once?
She asked about sometimes when she speaks, her native language comes out, right? Few words. So she just asked how to tackle that.
Okay. I'm so sorry about the network connection. We know internet is very fickle here. So I will just summarize what I have said to her. That is to avoid using avoid using native language. That mainly happens because there are some words that we are familiar with in our native language and not in the English language. Honestly, there are like maybe 5 or 6 vegetables that I don't know what they're called in English. I'll always ask Akanksha, oh, what is this called? What is Loki called in English? Literally. So one way to do that is, first of all, improving your vocabulary. Something you can do is every day, doesn't matter where it is, maybe learn 2 new words from the dictionary and write it down. If there is a person who has used a word that you're not familiar with, what you can do is just ask them. Nobody is going to judge you. I'm telling you honestly, we're very afraid of what people think of us. So ask them, oh, you just use this word, I'm not sure I know what tusks mean, could you please tell me what tusk means? And they will explain it to you. Honestly, they will. Or if you're afraid to do so, keep a mental note, go look for it, go look it up and write it down. That will be your word of the day. Have a practice of having a word of the day and use it later on in your future. Okay, I hope that covers it up. More questions? Let me check the chat box.
Thank you for that,
You're
Kshitij. Thank you.
welcome. You're welcome. Osmosis, the osmosis trial and the certificate. So right after this event, I will be posting a feedback form. Please fill that up, because only the people who will fill out the feedback form and have attended the webinar, they are the ones who are going to, we have a track of who all attended the webinar. They are the ones who are going to receive the certificate. If within, let's say, a week you haven't received your certificate, send me an email. Okay, I will type my email here and I will share it with Kshitij also. But do remember to fill out the feedback form. I will actually add the feedback form here, because this is what is going to help you get your Osmosis Prime. And Osmosis Prime, you should have filled the RSVP form, because that's how the Osmosis partners know who all to send the Osmosis Prime to. So the RSVP form is the one that you registered for this webinar with. So do fill that up. If you have, then you will receive the Prime. You will receive it by next Friday, which it's always 1 week after the event has occurred. So you receive it by next Friday. Okay. And if you haven't, then personally text me. I'll make sure that you receive it. Okay. Don't worry about that. Okay, next question. In your clinical rotations, how you manage with the people's language here in consultation, you learn Filipino language. Okay, so most of the, not most, let's say some of the people can speak in English. Sometimes we have the nurses or the other PGIs who have like, who are with us, and then they will translate for us. So that's how, and we also know some very basic phrases in Bisaya, at least like how to say fever, like kalimtura and ubo. Okay, so that we can at least communicate using these words. And also you can watch Filipino dramas. You can ask, the kuyas and ates, your Filipino friends, to teach you some words. There are some Telegram channels where you can learn Bisaya word for the day. Akanksha over here knows very good Bisaya. She knows Bisaya really, really well. Okay, like better than most of us. So she can really help you out on this. Akanksha, please give our attendees some tips on how to speak Filipino.
Thank you, Mosh. Actually, the one key thing is communication, talking to kuyas and ates. And also, if you just go out to buy random stuff, there are people there are people who are like restocking in malls, so you can just go there and ask what is it called in Bisaya, or you can just ask the NMDs if you have the courage to go up to them and communicate with them, what is it called and how do you say this in Bisaya. So just know the basic terms like what or how. So what is called unsa and your is imong, and name is pangalan. So you can just be like unsa imong pangalan. Just know the basic words so that you can form a sentence. That's what we did in the clinics. I Bisaya is really easy to understand if you know Spanish. So if you are a Spanish learner, so it's really easy. I know Spanish, so it was really easy for me to cope up with the Bisayan language. But the key here is to ask your kuyas and ates. I believe most of you are still in the dorm, so the cleaning kuyas and the cleaning ates are there, right? So you can go up to them and learn one new Bisayan word every single day. So this way you can add it up in your vocabulary. There are also a few channels on YouTube that teach how to communicate in Bisaya. So Mosh, we can share it with Kshitij so he can convey those channel links. There are like 20-minute videos on how to form a basic conversation in Bisaya so that you can have small talk with people and you can communicate with your patients. And this is how I learned. I'm not that good at Bisaya, how Mosh said, but I can understand and I can convey my idea. So that's how I did. Watched YouTube videos, communicated with kuyas and ates because we were in the pandemic, so we couldn't learn much. But all we did was talk to the kuyas and ates. They taught us one new word every single day. That's how it is. And I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Akanksha. I'm going to let you all in a secret that some of my NMD friends told me. What they speak here is not clear Bisaya. What we learned in SPC was Tagalog. Sometimes a lot of the people know Tagalog. And what they speak here is Davao Konyo. It is somehow like our, it's like slang Bisaya. Okay. One thing you can do is please do network with the dentistry people and NMDs and BS Bio, because even they think we are not approachable and we think they are not approachable, but they are. In fact, you can join committees like Criados and Liab and make more friends. Okay. And also you can have a quid pro quo. You know what that is? Most of these Filipinos, they love Bollywood movies and they want to learn Hindi. Okay. Or they want to learn Tamil. You teach them a few phrases, you get them to teach you a few phrases. So a quid pro quo goes a long way. Okay. Any more questions, guys? I think there are none. No more questions. Okay, so just a few things. Please do fill out the feedback form. I will request Kshitij to send this feedback form on your class groups also. And if you want more help with language, okay, you can obviously reach out to any of us on our LinkedIn profiles or Instagram profiles. You're more than welcome to. But also, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are not aware, but you have a DMSF peer facilitators organization, and in the future, like maybe in 2 weeks or so, they will be starting spoken English classes and language classes. So you can contact them on their social media sites, fill out the Google form, and then you can have a senior or a peer help you out with whatever language needs you have. Currently, if you need some counseling, if you're going through some problems and issues, you can still contact the peer facilitators. They also help you with your academic needs. If you need tutoring for anatomy, physiology, biochem, anything, then you can reach out to them, fill out the Google form, they will assign a tutor for you. So since your batch is new, I'm not sure if everybody knew that, but I will share their details also. Now can we move on to the next slide? Okay, so please do fill out the feedback form, okay, because without that I will not be able to send you your certificates. Okay, when they ask you which is the OMF that conducted this session, you can write down my name because I'm the official OMF for this event. Okay, then for if you're looking to purchase osmosis, there is a special deal for the DMSF students. You can use this link if you want to purchase, but you're either way is going to get the 2 weeks for free for sure, don't worry. And you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn, that's Moushami Roy. So if there are no more questions, then we can call it a day. Thank you guys for attending. I've had a lot of fun talking to all of you.
Thank you, Mosh.
So, and thank you